Welcome to a new week of the Soul Inspired Playground. My name is Madura Joshi, and I am a success and mindset business coach. You can go to www.igniteyourinnerpotential.ca to find out more about myself. And this week we have a very special guest. It's Dr. Nauman Naeem, who's here to talk to us about three ways to achieve your potential. And I'm very, very excited to have Dr. Nauman here with us because he's got so much insight. And best of all is he's written a brand new book. So thank you, Dr. Nauman. Why don't you come on and introduce yourself and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Great, Madura. Thank you very much for having me as a guest here on your show, and it's great to be here. And I'm Dr. Nauman Naeem. I'm a physician here working in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I would say that I'm a lot more than just a physician. And I can start by talking kind of about my journey. Is that a good place to start, Madura?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, tell us a bit about your journey, how you kind of transitioned from the medical profession into an author, because I think that's a huge thing.
So I have to go back into probably my adolescence if I want to really do justice and talk about where this all started. So actually, even my late childhood, ever since I was a child, I've had a very keen intellectual curiosity and a voracious appetite for knowledge, which really motivated me to read countless books. Up to this point, I can't even count how many books I've read. And so I had this intellectual curiosity. And I guess when I was 15 or 16, I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in bookstores, just kind of researching and seeing, what I could potentially dive into. And I was in this one section, I guess you could call it maybe a self-help / transformational section. And, this book caught my attention. It almost like fell out of the shelf. And it was someone who we all know, who I did not know at that time. And the name of the book was Unlimited Potential, and it was by an author by the name of Tony Robbins. And at that time, we're talking now in the mid-'80s, I didn't know who this man was, but the title of the book really fascinated me. So I read the back cover and sounded like an exciting read. So I bought the book and I read through it. I basically ripped through it in a day or two. And I was absolutely I had never read a book like this before. It basically just opened me up to so many new ideas and ways of seeing the world and seeing myself. And it truly was a book it was called Unlimited Power. It's called Unlimited Power, I believe. And it was truly a book about achieving your highest potential. And after I read that book, it was like I wanted to be this man. Like I wanted to do what he does. At that time, he's widely known as the father of coaching, life coaching. And it wasn't such a defined path. So, that started me on a path on reading all sorts of books on transformation and mindset and all these sorts of things. And even before I had read that book, I had been interested in medicine and becoming a physician, because what interested me about becoming a doctor was it combined learning a large amount of knowledge in a short period of time, combined service to humanity, and a relatively stable financial career. So, I went to medical school. I went through my training, did my residency, and I became a pulmonologist, or what you would call a respirologist here in Canada, and a critical care specialist. And I started practicing medicine. And what I started noticing, like now we're talking about 18 years of practice. So this has been the culmination of taking care of tens of thousands of patients. I started noticing that patients really did not get better. They did not heal. They remained stuck in the paradigm of chronic disease. And I also started noticing other trends in my patients. Like a lot of them, would have, negative thinking. They would have a lot of emotional blocks, and they had a very limited mindset. So the interest I had in achieving human potential that I had cultivated in my adolescence, I started exploring that more and started reading more and more books like by people like Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Wayne Dyer, and I dived into more books, too many authors to mention here. And it started to dawn upon me, why people don't heal. So now, in terms of writing my book, because I had this intellectual curiosity and I read, I have always been fascinated with writing a book. Like I've wanted to be an author long before I wanted to be a physician. And now, after doing this research I did into healing, which could also, be applied to human potential, I had the material to write a book. So I spent the last 2.5 years with fulfilling a lifelong dream. And I'm happy to say that last November, my book was picked up by a publisher, and it's going to be released this September. And that's kind of the nutshell, my journey in a nutshell, to tell me what has brought me to this point. And it's not so much that I'm transitioning from medicine to becoming an author and a speaker and a coach. I still practice medicine, but as transitioning more and more into that role as a speaker and a coach and a consultant, especially now I'm 2 months away from the release of my book. And, I'm just excited about, what's to come. So hope that answers your question.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's great. I know it was my dream to write a book as well, and I did it. I self-published. Eventually, I'm hoping to be picked up by a publisher just like you have. But that's an amazing, amazing thing to see a medical doctor see that people aren't healing through modern medicine because they're feeling stuck, like they're stuck in certain ways. So it's very enlightening. It's very refreshing, so to speak, that you see that, because I know I've had countless times where the medical profession wasn't even able to tell me what was my problem, and I had to go more of a holistic route, and they were able to tell me what was going on. Right. So I very much, it's very refreshing, and I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast today. So what would you say are the top 3 ways someone could really use or start to implement in their life to achieve that that human potential, achieve their potential?
That's an excellent question, and it's a good lead into to our discussion where it's going to go. In my book, I describe a 9-step process to healing, but I would say that's beyond the scope of the time we have here. So I'm going to focus on 3 very important points that come out of those 9 steps. So when we talk about human potential, we have to look at, what we have to do is we have to look at ourselves as a whole being. And what I mean by that is most people, and this applies more to healing and chronic illness and sort of realm, most people do not know what it means to be a whole being. Now, what it means to me is that you integrate yourself at the highest level of all the levels of your being. And so the levels of your being are not just the physical, mental, they are the emotional, and what I call vibrational, which is energy, where I'm referring to energy, spiritual. So I'm going to talk about mental, emotional, and vibrational when we talk about the 3 ways. Perfect. So let's talk about mental. When we talk about mental, we're talking about the human mind. And the human mind, if you look at it, is divided into 2 major parts, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, the thing is that a lot of people have their approach to achieving anything in their life or making major changes through willpower and motivation. But what people don't realize is that willpower and motivation lie in the realm of the conscious mind. But however, science and psychology has shown that the conscious mind only accounts for 5% of our behavior. Most of our behavior is subconscious, which is 95%. And at the age, they say that our subconscious behaviors and habits, are programmed by the time we're 7 or 8 years old. So you can imagine, trying to use willpower and motivation to only affect 5% of your mind, where 95% of it is subconscious. And one of the ways in which the subconscious mind affects our potential is through limiting beliefs. So let me get into limiting beliefs at this point. Limiting belief. So a belief is anything you hold to be true, regardless of whether there's evidence of its validity. Okay. So a limiting belief is a belief that achieves you from getting to your highest potential. And we all have limiting beliefs. It doesn't matter how successful you are, what you've achieved, we all have them, and we all have to overcome them. They can affect our health, they can affect our relationships, they can affect our careers, our finances. So one of the steps to actually healing is basically removing subconscious blocks and limiting beliefs. And I talk about that extensively in one of the chapters in my book, but I'm going to try to introduce it here briefly. The way to eliminate limiting belief is first to know that you have one. So the way we identify limiting beliefs is to look for a pattern of personal challenges or a recurrent pattern of negative thoughts in your life. So let me just give you an example. An example could be who has a pattern of failed relationships. Say they are always in relationships for a short period of time, they never work out, or that kind of wrong person syndrome, like you're always attracting the wrong person, right? And you're getting involved with the wrong person and you can never find the right person. So that's an example. That person pattern over time, they likely have a limiting belief around relationships. And the limiting belief could be, I'll never find the right person. I'll never be happy in a relationship. I'll never find love, or whatever it could be, right? So you have to look for a recurrent pattern of personal challenges and a recurrent pattern of negative thoughts, negative thinking as well. So once you identify the limiting belief, what you have to do is you have to ask yourself, is there any validity to this limiting belief? Is there any reason to believe it's true? So I started off with the example of relationships. What I'm going to start transition into a very common limiting belief, and that limiting belief is I am not enough, or I am not good enough. Okay, now that's a very common limiting belief. Like everyone suffers from that at some point, right? And this limiting belief usually stems from early childhood and our upbringing. It could be our parents, it could be our education system, it could be our peers, it could be the media, it could be popular culture. I mean, everything around us is trying to tell us that we need to look a certain way, dress a certain way, be a certain way, have a certain product. Even if you look at our education system, I mean, we're geared towards achieving the highest marks. And it's about achievement, achieving A's, straight A's, or whatever you want to call it. But marks are not a true measure of intelligence and potential. And, we all know that, but I mean, not everyone realizes that at that time. It's just telling us that we're not good enough. So if you want to apply the process, you look at, you look for evidence that, so you say to yourself, is there any validity to the limiting belief that I am not good enough? And if you really, really scrutinize, your acceptance of this belief, you'll find that this is other people in your environment telling you you're not good enough. You have no evidence or proof to say that you're not good enough. And then the next step to eliminating a limiting belief is to find evidence to prove that it is not true. Okay. So for the limiting belief of I'm not good enough, everyone can find examples in their life where they've achieved something, they have reached a goal, they have achieved success. Even if you don't see yourself as a successful person, have those milestones. So you look at those examples where you were good enough, you did achieve success, you did, get what you were seeking to reach for. So then what you do then is, once you've found evidence that, that there is no validity to this limiting belief, the next step is to to embody, to change that limiting belief into an empowering belief. So for the limiting belief of I'm not good enough, it would be, okay, so you reinforce the empowering belief. And in my book, I have a meditative process that I go through to rewriting limiting beliefs into empowering beliefs. It's a long meditation. I can't go through it here, but I will tell people how they can get my book at the end of this podcast. And then the next step is to take action on that empowering belief, to truly embody it. First step is really dealing with the subconscious mind, subconscious blocks, and limiting beliefs. And I can get into emotions unless you have any more questions around.
No, I think that's great, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's actually their limiting beliefs that are holding them back. They're always looking outside to see, oh, so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that. And they don't realize that it's their own limiting beliefs that are blocking them through that. And I know I run into that with my clients, because a lot of them have a lot of limiting beliefs, just as we all have. And I know I've had struggled with it for a long time and had to go through it and reaffirm positive beliefs and get rid of all the, so to speak, crap. But yeah, I think it's great that you're really diving deep into this in your book. So yeah, please continue with the emotion side.
So the next step is, so the next bigger part of our major part of our being is our emotional self. Okay. So what I mean by emotional self is how we deal with our emotions that come up in our daily lives and our emotions from the past. So basically, in order to discuss this, we have to really define what an emotion is, right? So an emotion is an experience in our body that basically is an interpretation of what we're going through in the moment, or of our environment, and is how our body communicates with their higher self. Okay, so the higher self you can call soul or spirit or whatever, but that's how our body communicates with a higher self. And the thing is that there's a whole spectrum of emotions that we experience in an average lifetime. It ranges from despair to ecstasy. The problem arises, we tend to label our emotions as positive emotions and negative emotions. And the tendency is that we want to avoid the negative emotions, the positive emotions, right? And this is just natural human tendency. But the problem arises when we don't allow ourselves to experience those negative emotions fully and thoroughly. And let me dive deeper into this. Everybody has had negative experiences in their life, what I would call traumatic events. Now, when I talk about traumatic events, it doesn't have to be anything major. I'm not talking about necessarily being physically or sexually abused, although a lot of people have been through that. But I'm talking about it could be, and I'm not saying this is minor, but it could be bullying at school, and that's not minor. I'm not downplaying that. It could even be a thing like, for example, like I've had clients who tell me stories, for example, of when they were kids, that in a subtle way, their sibling was favored over them. Was that, one time someone was with their sibling and their mother, and the mother got an ice cream or a treat for the sibling, but not for this person who I'm referring to. And that was perceived for them as a traumatic event, even though we may not think it is a major thing. Another example that we all go through when we first go to school. Okay, and I was talking to a patient about this the other week, about her 5-year-old. When we're dropped off at school for the first time, or preschool, some children do well with that. Others don't do well with that. They don't transition well, and they can perceive that as being abandoned. Even though we pick them up at the end of the day and we bring them home, but that could be perceived as abandonment, and that can be traumatic for the child. So things that we can be traumatic. Now, this is the way so what happens is that we often have these, you know, major or minor traumas from our past, and we have these negative emotions around those events, which we internalize. And when we internalize those emotions and don't face them and deal with them, they can cause patterns of dealing with stress that can lead to inflammation, that can lead to other symptoms in the body, eventually to chronic disease. And it doesn't only have to do with illness. The thing is that those trapped emotions, those negative emotions that we haven't deal with, affect how we respond to stressful events in our lives, and can affect our ultimate potential if we haven't dealt with those emotions. So the way to identify whether you have an emotional block is a recurrent pattern of negative emotions in your life. Like, you have to look at any recurrent pattern of negative emotions, and it could be there's different triggers we can have for those. For example, if say a child is at a, I don't know, a dance class or something, and then, you know, they're supposed to be picked up at a certain time. Say the parent is 10 or 15 minutes late. Be older now, maybe a teenager, they may perceive that as abandonment, even though that the parent arrives eventually to pick them up, right? So the thing is, we have to identify negative emotional patterns, and there is a process I discuss in my book. And what clients do is trace back that negative emotional pattern to its root or its sentinel events that led to it. And the important thing is this: you can no longer be in the midst of that event. So let's just say that it was a truly major traumatic event. You can't be in the midst of it. You have to have removed yourself from that situation. And what I encourage my clients to do is to feel those emotions fully around that event, or whatever it was, if that they can trace back to their past. And when we think of that, it may seem like, oh, I can't feel those emotions. I mean, they're too painful. You know, they're too traumatic and stressful. The thing is that we think that we often feel like if we allow ourselves to feel those negative emotions, we're gonna die. It almost feels like that, but we're not, especially if you're not in that situation. Actually, keeping those emotions suppressed and repressed and trapped are to depression, to addictions, because those emotions will try to surface. And if we try to repress, we may repress them through whatever, alcohol or drugs or other addictions, dealing with those emotions. So I help my clients trace those emotions back to their root and their source, and truly feel them and release them once and for all. Now, what if you can't trace it back? What if the memory is so repressed that you can't access it? Okay, so in that case, what I do is every emotion is felt in the body. So I ask the client, where do you feel this emotion in your body? And I ask them to feel that emotion fully in that part of the body where they feel them, and to release that emotion once and for all. And you can do that for any negative emotion that you feel, that you have this recurrent pattern of going back to your past. And the truth is that we're not here in this world to avoid negative emotions. We are here to experience every single emotion that life throws at us. Because what happens is that just by being human and living on this planet, you are going to experience pain. Pain is unavoidable. There's a difference, however, between pain and suffering. Pain in the moment, but suffering requires time. So you have to feel those emotions. You have to feel that pain. You have to release those negative emotions. And if you don't, over time, they will cause you to suffer. And I've seen this countless times, not only in patients, but in clients as well. So that's the second major step to achieving your potential, is to release all your negative emotions and get to their core. So I can go on, or unless you have any questions around emotions. One thing I wanted to mention, Amadura, is that when you get to the core of that negative emotion, there's a metaphor I use. You find this place of deep inner peace. And the metaphor I use is like a hurricane. A negative emotion is often like you're weathering a storm, like a hurricane, right? But what's at the center of a hurricane? At the eye of the hurricane is a center of complete peace. and serenity. So once you're able to burn through that negative emotion, you will come to that place of deep inner peace and love, which is your true nature. So you just have to be willing to, take that journey to the core of that emotion. So
That's awesome. Yeah. I did have a question. When you're trying to release those
yeah,
emotions, is the best way
yeah,
to first, obviously you have to know what it is that what emotion you're trying to release and where you feel it in your body. But how do you release it?
right,
How do you get rid of it? Because it's become part of you and you become comfortable
right,
being unhappy, but it's like that
right.
comfort zone, right?
So there's first thing I would say is that, okay, if you're someone who suffers from suicidal depression, I don't recommend in doing this. I recommending of a mental health professional, because it can, if you have suicidal depression, it can trigger, those tendencies in you. But usually this is best. It's difficult to do this by yourself, which is why I coach my clients through it. So what I do with my clients is that I ask them, I try to identify emotional patterns throughout their life. And I'm just I'm just trying to think of an example just to that I can use to illustrate this. Um, hmm. Okay, so a I have a client. Now, I'm not a relationship coach by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a client who I was helping with health issues, but I identified a negative emotional pattern. And that emotional pattern is that once the patient, say the patient was getting involved romantically with someone for the first time or new, like, dating and getting close to someone, um, fear would arise. Okay. And that fear would arise and lead to some sort of behavior, which would lead to sabotage of that relationship, or even if it wasn't a relationship, the dating encounter or whatever that might be. And they had a recurrent, this person had a recurrent pattern of this. And so I started and it was a major issue for this client. So I helped that client trace it back to a time when he must have been in his pre-teens, and he was really interested in a girl. He must have been, I don't know, 13 or maybe 12 or 13. And he approached this person, this girl. He remembers this vividly, and he doesn't remember the exact details of the conversation, but essentially she laughed at him and made fun of him, and her friends were, and she basically told her friends, and they also laughed and made fun of him. And then he had internalized, like, I mean, it was painful for him, but he had internalized this as pain, emotional pain, hurt, grief, whatever, and he had never dealt with that. And that's why later on in life, when he got close to someone, when he started dating, when it was blossoming into a potential relationship, it would lead to sabotage because of this rejection, which he had never dealt with early in his life. So that's just an example. And what I helped him do is I basically went through a process where I helped him relive that situation and basically just expressed to me how he felt, how it made him feel. And I got him to journal about it too. And it wasn't just that one time process. This is not just a one time process. Sometimes it takes multiple encounters to release these emotions, right? And I encourage the client to journal about it. So that's just an example of how I helped one client deal with, what I would call maybe fear of rejection, or grief around this one rejection they had in their past. So it's not a one-time process. Often it takes multiple encounters and time, especially if that emotional pattern is deeply ingrained, especially from that time in their life, early, like late childhood or adolescence. So
Awesome. Yeah. No, this is all amazing, amazing stuff to know about, because I think a lot of people have not really, they don't want to, or they may be too scared to even go this way. So I think this talking about this stuff and bringing it to light will give people maybe the courage to say, oh, maybe I should look into that, and then they can reach out to you, they can reach out to me, other people in
yeah,
this industry to help them
exactly.
get to that next level.
Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to emphasize, Madura, is that this is often not something you can do on by yourself, because often we have the fear of going into those dark places and to feeling those. You need the assistance of someone. And this isn't about therapy, right? I mean, often some people who do have the suicidal depression, they need a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, if it is to that depth. But if we're just talking about just run-of-the-mill negative emotions, often working with a coach you should work with someone to facilitate releasing those emotions. It's not easily done by yourself, because we have a natural tendency to repress those emotions. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to the point where we are. Correct. So you need to really work with someone to release those. I mean, that's what I recommend. So
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think having someone to facilitate, because we can't, our healing journey is kind of like a community journey, because we need someone to help us get to that next level. So
right.
what would you say? And so your last point, you were saying that vibrational energy
Right.
is really the third
Yes.
step for
Yeah.
achieving potential.
So the third major, right. But let me get into that. So when I talk about vibrational frequency, we really look at what our true nature is, right? So I've talked about becoming whole, integrating ourselves at all our levels. So if you truly look at who we are, if we look at our physical being, right? If we break this down into our fundamental building blocks, we're made of cells, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are made of subatomic particles. And those subatomic particles are just energy vibrating at a certain frequency. So our illusion of being, our appearance of being physical beings is really an illusion. All we are is energy. Okay, that's all we are. I mean, everything is energy. And Einstein proved this famous equation: energy equals a mass times the speed of light squared. So when I talk about raising your vibrational frequency, basically what I'm talking about is truly embodying your true nature as energy, that energy level to the highest level you possibly can. And that's what I mean by increasing your vibrational self, raising your vibrational frequency. So the question is, how do we do that? In my book, I actually talk about nutrition in a completely different way than most people talk about nutrition, because I talk about nutrition as a way to raise your vibrational frequency. Now, that conversation is beyond the scope of our interview. And if you want to know more about that, we can talk at a later time, or people can go to my book. Do is to talk about the 4 ways that we can increase our vibrational frequency, and that is by embodying of love, joy, gratitude, and appreciation. Okay, so let me just, for the sake of time, just talk about one of those. Let's talk about gratitude. Okay, gratitude is something that it should be a daily practice for all of us. Okay, it does not matter what situation you're in, whether you're in debt, whether you're divorced, what level of health you have, if you're suffering from illness, can find something to be grateful for. And practicing daily gratitude is a way to raise your vibrational frequency, because what daily gratitude does is that it sends a message to the universe. You have an appreciation or where you are, what you have, what you are doing, and it allows the universe to open you up to its abundance. Okay, so having a daily gratitude practice is an important way to raise your vibrational frequency. And this is just not theory. I mean, this is something that I have I practice on, I wish I could say I practice it on as regular basis as I preach, but I try to do it on almost a daily basis. And the way I do it is, I do it with my kids too. I have 3 kids, right? So, right, no matter how difficult it's been, how stressful it's been, what I've been through, I try to find at least 3 things that I am grateful for. And what I encourage people to do is to challenge yourself. Like, don't do the usual things like a roof over my head, food on my table, and my health. Find things that you may not normally think of as things that would give you gratitude. It could be someone holding a door for you when you went to the bank. It could be, being at the grocery checkout counter and getting a smile from the cashier. It could be, you're on the highway and somebody lets you in when you're trying to change lanes instead of rushing out in front of you so you can't get in there. Um, be creative with the things that you are grateful for. And what you'll find is that if you keep a gratitude journal and you write down 3 things you're grateful for every day, you'll find your abundance increase over time. You will find opportunities opening up for you. You'll find the right people uh, connecting with you who you need to take the next step in your life, whether it's in your business, your relationships, or whatever. You'll find the energy level. You'll have an improved outlook on life. You'll generally have the sense of well-being and overall happiness. So keeping a daily gratitude journal is one of the ways that vibrational frequency. And I talk about other ways as well in my book. I could talk for hours about all of this stuff, but we have limited time. So I just wanted to introduce one simple practice that everybody could do, and everyone could be, grateful for something. I'm gonna share with you a story. There's a video I watched. It was actually quite heartbreaking, and it's on YouTube. I'm sure anyone can find it. And it was these children in Syria. Okay, and I don't know who the cameraman was filming them, right? And you see these kids, they must have been 6 or 7, and they were picking rice up off of the ground, like grains of rice, right? And then this cameraman asked them, what are you doing? I said, we're trying to collect our next meal for the day. And I said, well, don't you have anything else that, he started asking them about, their parents or whatever, and why are you here by yourselves? He goes, we don't know where our parents are. And I'm assuming that they were killed by airstrikes or whatever. And kids who were picking up grains of rice said, we're just happy that we have this, whatever, this little amount of food to get us through this day. And when I watched that video, I was crying. I was in tears watching this. If these Syrian children living in one of the worst war zones in our planet, okay, can be grateful for picking up grains of rice off the ground for their next meal, who listening to this podcast right now, or anyone anywhere, has a right to say they have nothing to be grateful for? Nobody has the right to say that. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yes, that brought tears to my eyes as you explained it, and it's such a perfect example of when you look at children in war-torn countries, children in third world countries. You look at their face, and if you even give them something, if you're ever have the opportunity to travel there and give them something as small as a teddy bear, their face lights up. It's such an amazing thing to see, because they don't have anything, but they're just so grateful for that gift. And I think we all forget that we have so much in our lives to be grateful for. Right. And we forget that.
I mean, we live in North America. We have access to so much. I mean, even if you're in, you don't perceive that you have where you are, where you want to be in life, you have the potential. We have access to the resources to get us where we want to be. A lot of people are not even that fortunate, right? So we have so much to be grateful for. And it is what opens us up to the abundance of the universe. And I think it is a crucial practice for everybody. So
I agree. I think I have a gratitude journal, so I know, and I tell this to my clients as well. Use a gratitude journal, even if it's 3 things. It changes how before going to bed. It changes the way you're feeling. Instead of going to bed mad and upset and cranky, you can think about, oh, this is something I feel good about, right? You bring that feeling good emotion back to yourself. But what would you say if there's one thing that you could tell our viewers today to help them achieve their potential? What is that one piece of advice you could provide to them?
So that's a great question. The one piece of advice would be is that everybody, none of us are here by chance. We all have a reason for being here. And I would say the most important piece of advice I can give the viewers and the listeners is that you need to find out what your powerful why is, why you are here. So often people refer to purpose, life purpose. Well, I think we all have the same purpose, and our purpose is to awaken to our true nature, who we truly are. But that purpose can be expressed through our life calling, our life mission, what we have been put here to do. And I encourage everyone to, no matter what you're doing, even if you hate your job, you're in a bad relationship, or you have ill health, it doesn't matter where you are in life. Everybody needs to ask themselves why they are here and what their life's mission is. And this is the key to true fulfillment. Okay, this is the key to true fulfillment. And I go through a series of questions in my book that helps people identify what their life mission is and their calling. And some of those questions I can share with you right here would be, what can you do right now for hours without recognizing that the time has passed? What do people compliment you on in terms of your skills, talents, and abilities? Who do you admire for what they do or what they have accomplished? What were your childhood dreams and fantasies and ambitions? And there's a lot more questions I go through. So one of the most important thing I would say is that you need to find out your powerful why for being here. And sadly, the majority of people are not living their true life's calling, and they're not embodying their life's purpose. So that would be the most important thing I would say.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What is a way that our viewers can order your book? Is it on pre-sale? Can they pre-order it? Is there a website that they can check out to know more about you?
Excellent. So I have a website that just came online actually a few weeks ago. It's healingfromtheinsideoutbook.com. All one word, all small letters. So healingfromtheinsideoutbook.com. There you can find a link to my book that's available on Amazon. And all major booksellers have this book for pre-order right now. I checked this past week. Indigo, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, they all have it for pre-order. It will be released in the US September the 12th, later in Canada, September the 22nd. There you can also, there's also other interviews I've done that you can listen to and watch. I have a blog there where I post regular articles. I've just started to do that, so there's not a lot there, but there are a few articles there. And I have information about my coaching services and how to book a free session with me if you're interested in exploring working with me as a client in terms of my coaching. And my contact is there as well. My email is wholehealthexpert@gmail.com. But that's on the website, and you can contact me through there if you want to do a free session. For a free session, there is no obligation. I mean, you identify an issue you want to work on. We work on it for you know, up to 2 hours I've worked with people, you know, on a free session. And, you know, they're usually very powerful sessions, right? Because I hold nothing back. Like, hold nothing back. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if you're a paying client or you're just trying to explore whether you want to work with me. I hold nothing back because I believe in serving people powerfully. And that's the whole reason I wrote this book, because my goal with this book is to make a global impact, nothing short of a global impact. I mean, I want to change the way we approach chronic disease. I want to change the way we approach our health, healing. And the book can easily have been called How to Achieve Your Highest Potential, even though it's called Healing from the Inside Out, because it's one and the same, and it's the same process. So I encourage your viewers to check out my website and contact me if they feel inclined to explore further.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Naeem. It's been awesome having you on. And folks, if you want to know more, please go to his website. I will post the link at the bottom of the video. And you can also check out my website at www.igniteyourinnerpotential.ca to find out more about my coaching. And I thank you all for watching. I hope this was another beautiful session for you folks who are watching on the Soul Inspired Playground. And we will see you next Monday at 6 p.m. Mountain and 8 p.m. Eastern for another amazing guest bringing you becoming fun again in life and enjoying the process of being an entrepreneur. Thank you so much. Have a great day.